There is a moment, just after a child is born, before the first cry has even finished, when the small body goes still for half a second. Not from fear, from something closer to recognition, as if a quiet question had just been answered without anyone asking it aloud, as if the room, with all its strange light and unfamiliar air, were not new after all, but only newly entered, the way you might walk into a house you have never visited and still, somehow, know where the kitchen is. We do not remember this moment. None of us do. And yet something in us seems to know it happened, the way the body knows how to fall asleep without being taught, the way the heart knows how to beat without being asked. There is a kind of peace that does not begin with us. It is older than our first breath, older than our name, older than the very first time someone looked into our face and decided who we were going to be. And tonight, if you are willing, we are going to sit with that peace for a while. Not chase it, not work for it. Just sit close to it, the way you might sit close to a fire someone else built, warming your hands at a flame you did not have to light. You do not need to know anything about where this comes from to let it hold you tonight. You do not need a steady mind or a quiet house or a day that went well. If your thoughts are already moving, fast and a little tangled, that is all right. That is simply what minds do in the dark, when the noise of the day finally has room to be heard. We are not going to fight that noise. We are only going to sit beside it for a while. The way you might sit beside a restless friend without needing them to calm down before you'll stay. Let your eyes rest. Let your jaw soften. Just slightly, the small unclenching that happens when no one is watching. And take one slow breath, not a deep, effortful one. Just a breath that is allowed to be as long as it wants to be, in and then out, like something settling onto a cushion after a long day of standing. There is an old way of looking at things, older than most of what fills our days, older than the buildings we live in and the roads we travel, that says something quite simple and quite strange if you have never heard it before. It says that before you were born, you were already at peace. Not peaceful in the way a held breath is peaceful, waiting to be released. How peaceful the way water is peaceful before a stone is thrown into it, whole and undisturbed and complete, not lacking a single thing that life would later add. And what we spend our years doing, according to this old way of seeing, is not building that peace from nothing. It is something closer to remembering it, uncovering it, the way you might brush snow from a path that was there all along, waiting under the white. This will not be a night of answers. We are not here to settle anything or to prove a single thing to be true. Old teachings like this one are not meant to be argued with. They are meant to be carried gently, turned over a few times like a stone in your pocket, and set down again if they do not fit. So carry this one loosely tonight. Let it sit somewhere near you, unexamined, unforced. There is nothing you need to understand before you're allowed to rest. There is nothing you need to fix tonight. Let the day, whatever it held, begin to loosen its grip on your shoulders. Let us begin. Let us explore a story about this, a small one, the kind that is told and retold in different forms in different places, because something in it keeps proving true. Long ago, in a village at the edge of a wide valley, there lived an old lamplighter whose only work each evening was to walk the lanes and light the lamps before dark settled in fully. He had done this so many years that his legs knew the path better than his mind did. He could have walked it blind, and some nights, when the fog came down thick off the hills, he very nearly did. One evening, a boy from the village, too young yet for work of his own, I'd walked alongside him out of simple curiosity, the way children sometimes attach themselves to whatever is happening in front of them. He watched the old man lift his long taper to each lamp, watched the small orange bud of flame catch and steady and hold. "Where does the flame come from?" the boy asked, after the third or fourth lamp. "From the last one," said the lamplighter, nodding back toward the lamp behind them, still burning quietly in the dusk. "But where did that one come from?" "From the one before it, and that one from the one before that." The boy considered this for a while, frowning the particular frown of a child trying to outsmart an adult. "Then where did the very first flame come from? The one at the start of everything?" The lamplighter stopped walking. He looked at the boy for a long moment, not impatiently, as the way some adults look at children who ask too much, but carefully. The way you might look at someone who has just, by accident, asked exactly the right question. "I do not think there was a first flame," he said slowly. "I think there was always flame, somewhere, passing itself along. What we light each night is not a new fire. It is the same old warmth, finding a new wick to rest in for a while." The boy did not fully understand this. How could he, at his age? But he carried the words with him anyway, the way children sometimes carry the things they do not yet understand, setting them down somewhere inside themselves to be picked up again later, much later, when life has given them a reason to. Here is what that small exchange points to. If we step back from it for a moment and look at it plainly, like we tend to think of a flame as belonging to its lamp, this lamp burning right now, here, tonight. And in one sense, of course, that is true. The light in front of you is the light in front of you. But the flame itself, the warmth, the particular quality of fire, was never created by the lamp. The lamp only gave it a place to rest for a while. The fire passed through. It passed through the wick before this one, and the one before that, all the way back further than anyone troubled to count. And it will pass on again after this particular lamp has gone dark. This is, in its own quiet way, something old teachers have long said about the peace we are speaking of tonight, and perhaps even about ourselves. We tend to think of our peace, our calm, our sense of being all right, as something that belongs to us, something we must personally build, personally earn, personally keep alive through effort. The way you might think you alone are responsible for keeping a single lamp burning against the wind. But maybe, and we offer this only as a maybe, a soft suggestion rather than a claim, maybe the peace you are looking for tonight was never something you had to create in the first place. Maybe it is older than you. Maybe it has simply been passed along, lamp to lamp, person to person, breath to breath, long before it found its way to the particular wick that is you, here, in this body, on this night. You did not invent the warmth. You only gave it, for a while, somewhere to rest. There is a second story, smaller than the first, that sits alongside it well. In a quiet town at the edge of a forest, there was a weaver, known for the evenness of her cloth. Not famous, not celebrated beyond her own streets, just known, the way a good baker or a reliable well is known. A young apprentice, newly come to learn the trade, asked her one afternoon how she had become so steady at her work, how her hands never seemed to hurry, even when the looms of other weavers clattered on around them. The old weaver did not look up from her work. "I did not make my hands steady," she said. "My grandmother's hands were steady before mine, and her mother's before that. I only sat down at the loom they left me, and the steadiness was already there, woven into the wood and the wool and the years. I am not steady. I am only sitting inside steadiness that has been here a long time." The apprentice did not entirely believe this. It is hard, when you are young, to believe that anything good in you might not be entirely your own doing. But she remembered it, and years later, when her own hands had grown sure at the work, she found herself saying something very close to the same thing to a younger apprentice of her own. You might carry something like this with you tonight, lightly, the way you would carry a small stone in your pocket, rather than a heavy one in your arms. The thought that whatever calm you are reaching for, whatever rest you feel you have not yet earned, might not need to be built from nothing by you alone, tonight, in the dark, with a tired mind and a long day still echoing in your chest. It might simply be waiting, the way a lamp waits for its wick, the way a loom waits for hands. All you are asked to do is sit down. All you're asked to do right now is let your body settle a little further into wherever it is resting, and let that be enough. Take a breath now, however it wants to come. There is nothing you need to do with it. Notice, if you can, the small weight of your own body against the bed beneath you. Not a thought to follow, just a simple fact to rest in for a moment. The room around you does not need your attention. The thoughts still moving through your mind do not need to be solved tonight. When you are ready, in your own time, we will go on together. Let us explore another story, a little further along this same thread. Before any of us had names, before any of us had been given a single word to describe ourselves, there was, so this old way of seeing puts it, simply a vast, quiet sea. Not a sea of water exactly, though water is the closest thing we have to point to it with. A sea of plain awareness, undivided, untroubled, asking nothing of anyone, because there was no one yet to ask anything of. And from that sea, the old teaching goes, countless small rivers eventually formed, countless lives, countless minds, countless small selves with their small names and their small worries, each one carving its own path down through the land, each one believing, after a while, that it had always been a river, separate and apart, with its own beginning and its own destination. But a river forgets something a sea never forgets. A river forgets that it was sea first. Picture, if it helps, a particular river. Not a real one you could find on a map, just an imagined one, winding through hills and farmland, narrowing here, widening there, tirsi, picking up the color of the soil it passes through. For a long stretch of its journey, that river believes itself to be entirely its own thing. It rushes where rushing seems urgent. It pools where the land lets it rest. It carries leaves and small branches, and the reflected light of passing clouds. And if you could ask it, somewhere in the middle of its course, whether it remembered the sea, it might not even understand the question. Of course I am a river, it might say. I have always been a river. This rushing, this narrowing, this constant movement forward, this is simply what I am. And then, without any warning it could have prepared for, the land runs out. The banks fall away on either side, and the river, still moving, still carrying its leaves and its light, finds itself spreading wide and slow into something enormous and still, and impossibly old. Not a stranger, not an ending it should fear. The sea it is entering is the very thing it was made of all along. It does not stop being water when it joins the sea. It simply remembers all at once what kind of water it always was. We are not telling you this story to suggest something frightening about endings. We are telling it because of what it says about beginnings, about the peace that may have been there before the rushing ever started, before the narrow banks, before the long, busy middle of the journey that we spend most of our lives believing is the whole of who we are. Perhaps, maybe before you were the particular river of worries and tasks and small daily urgencies that you have come to call yourself, you were something wider, something that did not need to rush anywhere, because it was already, in its own way, everywhere it needed to be. This is not a thought to solve tonight. It is only a thought to let sit near you, the way you might let a candle burn in another room while you fall asleep, not staring at it, not needing to watch it, just aware, faintly, that it is there, giving off a small steady warmth somewhere close by. Let your shoulders drop a little further into the bed now, if they have not already. There is nothing waiting for you tonight that requires your effort. The sea does not work to be the sea. It simply is. And the rivers, in their own good time, find their way back to it. You do not have to find your way back to anything tonight either. You only have to let yourself rest exactly where you already are, and trust that the rest of it, whatever the rest of it turns out to be, will still be there in the morning, unrushed, unhurried, waiting the way it has always waited. When your breath has settled a little more, we will go on together. There is something we have all noticed, even if we have never put words to it. Some days the weather inside us is calm, clear, unhurried, easy to be near. Other days, it is not. Worry rolls in like cloud cover. Irritation flashes through like distant thunder we cannot quite locate the source of. A single difficult thought can turn the whole sky grey for an entire evening. The way one piece of news can change the colour of a whole day. And lying here now, in the dark, and you may notice some version of this happening, thoughts moving across your mind the way weather moves across a hillside, one after another, none of them asking your permission first. Here is what is easy to forget, especially at night, when the weather feels loudest. Weather is not the sky. It only passes through it. Above every storm, no matter how long it lasts, no matter how dark the clouds become, or how hard the rain falls, the sky itself does not change. It does not get torn, or stained, or worn down by the passing weather. It simply allows the weather to move through, the way a room allows sound to move through it, without becoming the sound itself. And when the storm finally passes, and it always eventually passes, the sky is not relieved exactly, because it was never actually troubled. It was only, for a while, hosting something that was never going to stay. You're allowed to think of your own mind this way tonight, if it helps, though we offer it only as a small, gentle suggestion, rather than anything you need to believe outright. Perhaps the worry moving through you right now, or the long list of tomorrow's small tasks, or the stray, sharp thought that keeps circling back uninvited. Perhaps none of that is actually you, in the deepest sense. Perhaps it is only weather. And perhaps you, the part of you that notices the weather at all, the part of you quietly aware of all this thinking happening, perhaps that part has never once been touched by any storm that has passed through it. Not one, not ever. Let us explore a story about this. In an old monastery built high in the mountains, where the clouds came and went so often that the younger monks joked the building had its own private weather, there lived an elder who was known, gently, as the calm one, not because nothing difficult ever happened to him, but because nothing difficult ever seemed to move him for very long. A younger monk, frustrated after a string of restless, irritable days, finally asked him directly, "How is it that nothing disturbs you? Don't you feel the same anger I feel? The same boredom, the same fear?" The old monk considered this for a while before answering, the way he considered most things. "I feel all of it," he said. The anger comes, the boredom comes, even the fear sometimes comes more than I would like, and I have simply stopped believing I am required to follow each one wherever it tries to lead me. But how do you stop following it? I did not say I stop it from coming, the old monk said. I only stop introducing myself as it. When anger arrives, I do not say, I am angry, as though anger were my whole name now. I say, anger is visiting, and I let it sit in the room with me for a while, the way you would let a guest sit, without handing them the keys to the house. The younger monk sat with this for a long time afterward, turning it over the way you might turn over a stone you are not sure is valuable yet. It took him many more restless days, and many more visits from anger and boredom and fear, before he began to feel, faintly, what the old monk had meant. The feelings did not stop coming. What changed, slowly, yet was his sense of who was hosting them, and who was being swept away by them. Step back from the story for a moment, and you can see plainly what it is pointing toward. The old monk did not become calm by getting rid of his weather. No one does. What changed was his relationship to it, the quiet, steady understanding that a feeling passing through him was not the same thing as a feeling defining him. This is not a small distinction, even though it sounds like one. It is, in its own way, the whole of the teaching. You are not asked tonight or any night to stop your thoughts from coming. You could not do that even if you tried, and trying would only give the thoughts more weight than they need. You are only invited to notice that you are the sky they are passing through, and not the storm itself. There is a second small story that walks alongside this one. A woman who kept bees, in a village known for little else but its honey, was once asked by a visiting trader how she managed to work calmly among so many bees without ever being stung. "Oh, I am stung plenty," she said, laughing. "My hands have been stung more times than I could count." "Then how do you stay so calm around them?" "Because I learned a long time ago that being stung is simply part of being near something alive and useful. I do not run from the hive because of one sting. I do not blame the bees for being bees. I tend to the sting, and then I go back to my work, because the work was never about avoiding every possible pain. It was about the honey." There is something almost too simple in that answer, and yet it sits well alongside the story of the old monk. We are not promised, tonight or ever, a mind free of stings, free of sharp thoughts, free of sudden worry, free of the small irritations that drift through almost any quiet hour. What we are offered instead, gently, is the chance to stop treating each sting as proof that something has gone wrong. The bees were always going to sting sometimes. The sky was always going to host some weather. This has never meant the hive was a mistake, or the sky was broken. It has only ever meant that something alive was passing through, doing exactly what living, breathing, weather-making things do. So here is something small you might carry with you tonight, nothing heavier than that. The next thought that comes, whatever it turns out to be, worried or sharp or simply tired, you do not have to fight it, and you do not have to believe it tells you who you are. You might simply notice it the way you would notice a cloud crossing in front of the moon, there, moving, already beginning to pass. You do not have to chase it away. You do not even have to name it correctly. You only have to let it be weather, and let yourself, underneath all of it, stay exactly as wide and as quiet as sky. Notice, for a moment, the simple weight of the blanket over you, or the cool air against whatever part of your skin is uncovered. There is nothing to adjust, nothing to fix about how you are lying right now. Let your breath come slowly, in its own time, without you needing to manage it. The thoughts that are still moving through you do not need an answer tonight. When you feel ready, we will continue on together. It is easy, when you are tired, to feel as though peace is something still ahead of you, a few more good decisions away, a few more calm days away, a few more years of getting things right away. You can spend a great deal of energy reaching for a stillness that always seems to sit just past where you currently are, the way the horizon always seems to sit just past wherever you are standing, no matter how far you walk toward it. And there is a particular kind of tiredness that comes specifically from this, not the tiredness of having done too much, but the tiredness of having tried, for a long time, to become something you are not yet allowed to simply be. There is an old, plain image that softens this kind of tiredness, if you let it. Think of a seed resting in dark soil. It is doing nothing visible. No leaf has broken the surface, and no root has yet pushed downward in any way you could measure from above. And yet something in that seed already contains the entire shape of what it will become, the height of the eventual stem, the particular curve of its eventual leaves, the color its eventual flower will be, if it flowers at all. None of that has to be built later. None of that has to be earned through extra effort while it sits there in the dark. It is already there, folded small, waiting only for time and warmth and a little water to let it unfold into what it already, secretly, is. You might be more like that seed tonight than like the gardener standing over it, anxious about whether anything is happening yet. Let us explore a story about this. In a small village known for its gardens, there was an old gardener who had grown so many things over so many years that the younger families in the village often brought her their failing plants, hoping she might know some trick the rest of them had missed. One spring, a young father brought her a small pot in which he had planted a seed many weeks before, following her exact instructions, watering it carefully, setting it in just the right light. Nothing had come up. He was certain he had failed somehow, certain there was some better, faster method he simply hadn't learned yet. The old gardener examined the soil, pressed 2 fingers gently into it, and said nothing alarming at all. "It's still becoming," she said simply. "But how do you know? There's nothing to see." "There rarely is for a long while," she said. "The part you can't see is doing most of the work. Roots first. Oh, always roots first, long before anything shows itself above the soil. If I dug it up right now to check on it, I would only kill the very thing I was trying to help along." The young father left unconvinced, certain that surely there was something more he ought to be doing. He came back to check on the pot daily for almost 2 more weeks, each day a little more disheartened, until one ordinary morning, without warning, a single green shoot had simply appeared, as though it had not needed his worry at all, as though, in fact, his worry had had nothing to do with it whatsoever. He went back to the old gardener and admitted, half embarrassed, that he had nearly given up. "Most people do, right before the shoot comes," she said, not unkindly. "It's the hardest stretch. Not because anything is going wrong, but because nothing visible is going right yet. The roots don't care whether you believe in them. They simply keep doing what roots do." Step back from this story for a moment, the way the old gardener might step back from her own garden at the end of a long day and look at what it is quietly suggesting. So much of what troubles us, especially at night, is the fear that nothing is happening, that we are failing simply because we cannot yet see proof of progress. But growth, real growth, has almost never announced itself in advance. It has almost always done its truest work underground, out of sight, while the person above the soil grew anxious for some visible sign that things were going to be all right. Perhaps the peace you are looking for tonight is doing something similar. Perhaps it is not absent simply because you cannot currently see it. Perhaps, like a root, it is doing its quiet work somewhere beneath the surface of your attention, in a place you were never going to be able to check on directly, no matter how many times you dug a worried finger down into the soil of yourself to look. There is a second story that fits well alongside the first. A craftsman who made bows for hunters in his region, slow, careful work, the kind that could not be rushed without ruining the wood, was once visited by a young apprentice eager to learn the trade quickly. The young man kept asking when he would be ready to make his first bow on his own. "When the wood tells you it's ready," the old craftsman said, which the apprentice found deeply unsatisfying as an answer. "But how will I know when that is?" "You won't." "For a long time," the craftsman admitted. "You'll think you're ready long before you are. And you'll think you're not ready long after you already could have started. The wood doesn't care about your timeline. It bends when it bends and not a moment sooner, no matter how badly either of us wants it to." The apprentice spent the better part of a year simply watching, sanding, waiting, far longer than he wanted to, far longer than felt fair given his eagerness, before the old man finally handed him a piece of wood and said only, "Now." Not because the apprentice had done anything differently that day, simply because enough quiet time had finally passed for both the wood and the apprentice's hands to be ready in a way that could not have been rushed into being any earlier. You do not need to force anything tonight, and you certainly do not need to prove anything to yourself about how ready you are or are not for sleep, for calm, for whatever tomorrow happens to ask of you. The wood bends when it bends. The seed shows itself when it shows itself. And the small, quiet rest you are reaching for right now does not require you to dig down and check on it every few minutes to make sure it is still working. It is allowed to be doing its work in the dark, unseen, the way roots always have, the way good wood always has, long before either of them is ready to be looked at directly. So here is something small to carry with you, light enough not to need carrying at all, really. The next time you catch yourself believing that nothing is happening, that you are behind somehow, that calm should have arrived by now, and clearly hasn't. You might simply remember the seed in its dark bed, doing everything it needs to do exactly on schedule, without once needing your permission, your supervision, or your worry. Feel, if you can, the place where your body meets whatever is beneath it, the mattress, the pillow, the simple, unglamorous fact of being held up by something solid, while you do nothing at all to deserve it. There is no task waiting in this stillness. Nothing below the surface needs checking on tonight. Let your breath lengthen on its own, however slowly it wants to. When you are ready, we will continue. There was a time, long before you can remember, when you required nothing of yourself. No achievement, no proof of worth, no long list of things you should have already figured out by now. You simply existed, and that was enough. Not enough in the sense of barely passing, but enough in the fullest, most complete sense of the word. Someone held you, most likely, in those early days, without asking first whether you had earned it. You were fed when you were hungry, not because you had demonstrated your value, but simply because you were there, small and breathing, and that alone was reason enough. We grow out of this so quickly, so thoroughly, that most of us do not even notice the moment it happened. The moment we began to believe that love, calm, safety, and rest had to be earned through some quiet, ongoing performance. We start keeping score without ever deciding to. We start measuring our worth against the day's small failures, the unanswered message, the task left undone, at the way we spoke too sharply to someone we love. And by the time we are lying here, now, in the dark, trying to fall asleep, some part of us may still be running that quiet tally, half convinced that rest has to wait until the ledger comes out even. It never does come out even. Of course, it was never supposed to. That was never how this worked. Let us explore a story about this. In a small house at the edge of a quiet town, a grandmother once sat for hours holding her newest grandchild, only a few days old, while the child's exhausted mother finally slept in another room. The baby did nothing remarkable. She did not smile yet, not really, not in any way that could be called intentional. She did not speak. She offered nothing back to the old woman holding her, no thanks, no recognition, and no proof that the holding was appreciated or even noticed. A neighbor, stopping by to see the new arrival, watched the grandmother sitting there, utterly content, and asked, half in jest, "Doesn't it get boring, holding a baby who can't do anything yet?" The old woman looked down at the small, sleeping face for a long moment before answering. "She isn't supposed to do anything yet," she said. "That's not what this is for. I'm not waiting for her to become interesting. She's already exactly what she's supposed to be, right now, doing nothing at all. I'm not holding her for what she'll give me later. I'm holding her because she's here." The neighbor did not entirely understand this, the way it can be hard, after enough years of being told otherwise, to understand that you might be loved without first having to be useful. But the grandmother had lived long enough, and lost enough, and loved enough, to know something simpler and older than the world generally teaches, that worth was never actually something a person built over time, brick by brick, achievement by achievement. It had been there from the very beginning, the way warmth is there in a fire from the very first spark, not added in gradually as the fire proves itself capable of burning. Step back from this story and notice what it is gently suggesting about your own night tonight. You are not required, before you are allowed to rest, to have proven anything today. You are not required to have been productive enough, kind enough, accomplished enough, or even calm enough to have earned this moment of stillness. The grandmother did not wait for the baby to deserve her attention. And whatever quiet, watching part of you exists beneath all your daily striving, whatever in you simply notices the world without needing to perform for it, that part of you has never once needed to earn the rest. It is being offered right now. There is a second story worth setting beside the first. A baker in a busy town, known for rising before dawn each day to prepare bread for the whole street, once confessed to an old friend that she could not remember the last time she had felt truly at ease, not working towards something, not catching up on something, not falling behind on something. Always one step ahead of exhaustion, or one step behind it, never simply still. Her friend, who had known her a long time, asked a strange question in return. "Do you remember the bread you make before you've added the yeast? Before it's risen, before it's been kneaded even once? Of course. It's just flour and water at that point. Nothing yet. And is it less bread in that moment than it will be later? Or is it simply bread that hasn't shown itself fully yet?" The baker considered this for a long while, the way you consider a question that seems at first to have nothing to do with what you actually asked. "I suppose it's already what it's going to be," she said slowly. "The yeast doesn't make it bread. It just helps it become visibly what it already secretly was." "Then perhaps you are something similar," her friend said. "Not unfinished, not lacking, only not yet visibly showing all of what you already, secretly, are." The rest doesn't have to be earned through more needing. Sometimes it only has to be allowed, the way dough is allowed to simply sit undisturbed, as while it becomes what it was always going to become. This is, in its own roundabout way, one of the oldest and gentlest claims that teachings like this one tend to make. That you are not a half-finished project requiring constant supervision and improvement before you are allowed any peace. You are something closer to dough that has already been mixed, already containing everything it needs, simply needing time and warmth and permission to rise without anyone standing over it, checking impatiently every few minutes to see whether it has done enough yet. So here is something small and undemanding to carry with you tonight. You do not have to have earned this rest. You do not have to tally up today's successes and failures before you're allowed to let your eyes close. The part of you that is tired right now is allowed to simply be tired, without first proving that the tiredness is justified. You were held once, long before you could do anything at all to deserve it. You're allowed to be held again tonight, in your own bed, by your own breath, by the simple, unearned fact of being alive in this particular moment, asking nothing further of yourself. Notice the quiet weight of your own hands, wherever they happen to be resting right now, on the blanket, against your chest, open at your sides. There is nothing for them to hold on to tonight. Let your breath come and go without supervision, the way it has been doing, quietly, your whole life, long before you ever thought to pay attention to it. When you are ready, we will go on together. Now, there is a particular kind of effort that quietly exhausts people more than almost any other kind, and it is this: the effort of trying to calm down. You have likely felt it before, lying here, perhaps even tonight, telling your own mind to settle, telling your own body to relax, and feeling, instead of relief, a strange new layer of tension arrive on top of the old one. Trying to relax is its own kind of trying. It has its own weight. It asks something of you, even while it claims to be asking for rest. There is an old image that can loosen this particular knot if you let it sit with you for a while, rather than rushing to understand it all at once. Think of a large bell, struck once, ringing out across some quiet stretch of land, a monastery courtyard perhaps, or the center of a small village at dusk. In the first moment after it is struck, the sound is loud, almost startling, filling the whole space around it. But no one needs to walk over and press their hands against the bell to stop the noise. No one needs to work at silencing it. The bell does that on its own, slowly, the sound thinning and softening and finally settling back into the same stillness it came from. Simply because that is what a struck bell does, left alone, given enough time. This is something worth saying plainly. Stillness is not something the bell has to build for itself. Stillness is the bell's natural state. The ringing is the temporary visitor. The silence underneath was there before the bell was ever struck, and it will be there again, exactly the same, the moment the ringing finishes its course. The bell does not need to try to become quiet. It only needs to be left alone long enough to return to what it already, underneath the noise, still is. Let us explore a story about this. In an old monastery known throughout its region for the particular depth and clarity of its largest bell, there was a young monk newly assigned to its care. Each morning he struck it once, as was the custom, and each morning, as the long, resonant note filled the courtyard, he found himself growing strangely anxious, watching the sound, almost willing it to fade faster, as though its lingering presence were somehow his responsibility to manage. An older monk, noticing this nervous watching, finally asked him about it. "I keep waiting for the sound to stop," the young monk admitted. "It feels like it takes so long." I keep wanting to do something to quiet it faster." The older monk listened, then struck the bell again himself, and the two of them stood together as the note rolled out across the courtyard and slowly, slowly began to fade. "Tell me," the older monk said, as the sound thinned towards silence, "what are you doing right now, this very moment, to make the bell go quiet?" The young monk thought about it. "Nothing," he admitted. "I'm not doing anything. It's just fading on its own." "It always was," the older monk said, "from the very first moment you struck it. The fading was never something you had to add. It was built into the sound from the start, the same way silence was built into the bell long before either of you ever met. Your only mistake was believing the quiet needed your help to arrive." The young monk returned to his bell duties the following morning with something subtly different in him. Not a new technique, not a new method of striking the bell or watching it. Only a new willingness to simply let the sound do what sound does, trusting that the silence underneath did not require his supervision to return. Step back from this story for a moment and notice how directly it speaks to the very thing you might be doing right now, lying here, perhaps quietly trying to manage your own settling the way. The young monk once tried to manage his bell. You do not have to work your way into stillness tonight. You do not have to monitor your breath or correct your thoughts, or check repeatedly whether you have relaxed enough yet. The quiet you are reaching for is not something you build through careful effort. It is something that was already there, underneath whatever ringing the day left behind in you, waiting only for you to stop pressing your hands against it, trying to hurry it along. There is a second story that walks alongside the first, smaller, quieter still. A woman who lived near a wide, slow-moving river often told her children, when they were young and full of restless energy after a long day, to go and watch the water for a while before bed. One evening, her youngest, full of complaints about being unable to fall asleep, asked her why watching a boring river was supposed to help anything. "It's not boring," she said. "It's just slow. And it isn't trying to be anything other than what it already is." "But I can't be like the river," the child said. I keep thinking about everything. My thoughts won't slow down like the water does." "The water doesn't slow itself down on purpose either," she said. "It's simply moving the way water moves when nothing is rushing it. You don't have to force your thoughts to slow down tonight. You only have to stop rushing them, the way no one ever has to rush a river. Let them move at whatever pace they want to move at. They'll find their own slow water eventually, the same way every river does, whether anyone hurries it or not." The child did not fall asleep instantly that night. These things rarely happen instantly, for children or for anyone else, but something in the conversation stayed with her, a small permission she had not known she needed, that her thoughts did not have to be forced into stillness. They were allowed simply to slow down in their own time, the way water does, the way a struck bell does, the way almost everything in the natural world eventually settles, given enough patience and enough trust that the settling does not require supervision. So here is something small to carry with you tonight, lighter than almost anything else we have offered so far. If you notice yourself trying to calm down, actively working at it, watching your own breath with a kind of nervous attention, checking again and again whether you have relaxed yet, you might simply remember the bell. You might remember that the silence was never something it had to build. It was only ever something it had to stop interrupting. You do not have to force tonight's stillness into being. You only have to stop pressing your hands against the sound and let it fade in its own time, the way it always eventually does. Feel the quiet weight of the room around you now, however dark or however lit it happens to be. There is no sound you need to chase away, no thought you need to quiet on purpose. Let your breath come however slowly it wants to come, trusting that the slowing, when it happens, will happen on its own. When you're ready, we will continue together. There is a particular kind of dread that arrives sometimes in the last hour before sleep, when an unwanted thought knocks, uninvited, against the quiet you were hoping to settle into. A worry about tomorrow, a memory of something said badly, years ago, that still somehow has the power to make your face warm in the dark. A fear with no clear shape, no clear name, just a heaviness sitting somewhere behind the ribs. And most of us respond to this kind of visitor the same way, almost without choosing to. We try to keep it out. We push against the door. We tell it firmly that it is not welcome here, not tonight, not when we are this tired and this close to rest. And almost without fail, the harder we push against the door, the harder the thought seems to push back. There is an old, plain way of meeting this that asks something different of us. Not more effort, but less. It asks us to imagine, instead of a door we are defending, a door we are simply willing to open. Not because we are inviting trouble in on purpose, only because we have noticed over and over, in story after story like the ones we have been telling tonight, that whatever we fight tends to dig in its heels. And whatever we welcome tends eventually to soften and move on. Let us explore a story about this. In a small town along a well-traveled road, there was once an inn known for taking in travelers no other inn would house. The irritable ones, the exhausted ones, the ones arriving too late at night with mud still on their boots and short tempers still flaring from a long day on the road. The innkeeper, an older woman who had run the place for decades, was once asked by a curious traveller why she never turned anyone away, even the difficult ones, even the ones other innkeepers complained about and refused at the door. They're only difficult because they've been refused so many times already, she said. By the time they reach my door, most of them have been turned away 3 or 4 times already that night. I'm not foolish enough to think I can fix whatever made them difficult in the first place, and I only offer them a room and a fire, and let them be whatever they need to be until morning. But doesn't that exhaust you? Taking in everyone, even the ones who arrive angry or frightened or impossible to please. The innkeeper considered this for a moment, the way someone considers a question they have already answered many times to themselves, quietly over the years. It would exhaust me, she admitted, if I thought it was my job to change them before morning. But it isn't. My job is only to let them in, give them a bed, and trust that whatever trouble they arrived with will look different to them by daylight, the way it almost always does. I don't fight with my guests, and I just give them somewhere warm to sit with themselves until the difficult part of the night passes on its own. The traveller thought about this for a long while after leaving, the way certain conversations stay with you long past the moment they happened, returning at odd hours, in odd contexts, slowly making more and more sense each time. He had spent so much of his own life fighting at his own door, refusing his own worry, his own grief, his own anger, the way the other innkeepers refused their difficult guests, and wondered, for the first time, what it might feel like to simply let those things in instead, not to keep them forever, only to give them, as she said, somewhere warm to sit until morning. Step back from the story for a moment and notice what it is gently suggesting about the thought knocking at your own door tonight, how whatever shape it happens to be wearing. You are not required to defeat it before you are allowed to sleep. You are not required to argue it into silence or prove it wrong. or convince it to leave through sheer force of will. You might instead simply open the door a little. Let the worry in. Let it sit by the fire for a while without giving it the keys to the house, without handing over your whole night to its demands. Most difficult guests, given a warm room and no resistance to push against, grow tired far sooner than we expect. They are not looking for a fight. They are only looking for somewhere to be received. Let your breath settle for a moment here before we continue. There is no door you need to defend right now. Notice the simple, quiet fact of being still. Not still because you have fought your way into stillness, but still because, for this moment at least, there is nothing left for you to push against. Let your hands soften wherever they are resting. Let the back of your neck release whatever small tension it has been carrying without your permission. When you are ready, we will go a little further. There is a second story worth placing beside the first. A young mother, exhausted after months of broken sleep with a new infant, once confided in an older friend that she had started to dread the nights themselves, not because of the baby's waking exactly, but because of her own mind, which had taken to running through every fear imaginable the moment the house finally went quiet. What if something happened? What if she wasn't doing enough? What if, late into the night, long after the baby herself had settled back to sleep? Have you tried telling the thoughts to stop? The older friend asked, half knowing the answer already. Constantly. It never works. They just get louder, like they're offended I tried to silence them. That sounds about right, the friend said, with the particular gentleness of someone who has been through the same exhausted nights herself, years before. Thoughts are a bit like children that way. The more urgently you try to shush them, the more they seem to need to be heard. Have you tried instead just letting them say what they need to say, not arguing back, not agreeing either, just letting them speak, the way you'd let an upset child finish their sentence instead of cutting them off halfway through? The young mother tried this with some hesitation. The next time the what-ifs began their familiar circling, instead of pushing them away, she let each one finish. What if something happens? All right, I hear that. What if I'm not doing enough? All right, I hear that too. She did not argue with any of them. She did not agree with them either. She simply let them speak, fully, the way the innkeeper let her difficult guests in out of the cold. And somewhere in the middle of listening to the fourth or fifth what if, she noticed, almost without meaning to, that the urgency behind them had begun, quietly, to soften. This is not a method to master tonight, and it is certainly not something you need to get exactly right before it can help you. It is only an invitation, soft and entirely optional, to try opening the door a little, instead of bracing yourself against it. The next worry that knocks, you might let it in. You might say silently, and to whatever it is, all right, come sit by the fire for a while, without promising it anything more than that. Most guests, once truly welcomed, do not need to overstay. It is only the ones left standing out in the cold, knocking again and again, who learn to knock harder. So here is something small to carry with you tonight. You do not have to fight at your own door. You do not have to win some invisible argument with your own mind before you're allowed to rest. You might simply open the door, let the visitor in, offer it a seat by whatever quiet fire is left in you tonight, and trust that morning, as it always does, will eventually arrive to see the guest out gently, in its own time, without you needing to force anything at all. Notice, for just a moment, the quality of the dark around you. However dark or however dim it actually is, there is nothing in this darkness that needs solving. There is nowhere in this stillness that you are behind or late, or falling short of some standard you are supposed to meet by now. Let the weight of your body sink a little further into whatever is holding it. Let your breath find its own pace, the way water finds its own level, without anyone needing to measure it or correct it. When you're ready, we will go on together. There is a particular frustration that comes from trying to think your way out of a restless mind, turning a worry over and over, examining it from every angle, certain that if you just analyze it carefully enough, you will finally arrive somewhere calm. Most of the time, this does not work. Most of the time, the more you stir at a troubled thought, the murkier it becomes. The way stirring at the bottom of a pond does not clear the water. It clouds it further, sending up exactly the silt you were hoping to settle. There is an old, simple image worth holding here instead, gently, the way you would hold something fragile rather than something to be examined too closely. Think of a pond or a wide clay jar of water left standing in a quiet courtyard. If the water has been disturbed, stirred by a hand or a falling branch or some passing animal, it goes cloudy for a while, the fine particles of earth and silt suspended through it, blurring whatever lies beneath the surface. But notice what happens if no one touches it further. No one needs to filter it. No one needs to skim it, or pour it out and refill it, or do anything clever to it at all. Left alone, simply left alone, the silt begins to settle on its own, fine particle by fine particle, sinking back down to the bottom of the jar until the water above is clear again. Not because anyone made it clear, but because clarity was always its natural state. The cloudiness only ever a visitor passing through. Your own mind may be doing something very similar right now, however unclear it currently feels. The day stirred it, perhaps quite a bit, perhaps in ways still settling even as we speak. But the clearness underneath was never actually gone. It does not need to be manufactured through effort. It only needs you to stop stirring long enough, gently enough, for the silt to find its own way back down to stillness. Let us explore a story about this. In a small village known for its pottery, there lived an old potter who taught nearly every apprentice in the region how to work the clay. One of her newer students, a young man impatient with his own slow progress, grew frustrated one afternoon when the water he used to smooth his clay turned muddy in its basin, and he began stirring it vigorously, certain that vigorous effort would clear it faster. "Stop," the potter said, not unkindly, watching him stir. "You're making it worse." "But I need clear water. I can't work like this." "Then leave it alone," she said. "Set the basin aside and come back to it later. The water doesn't need your help to clear. It only needs you to stop interfering with it." The young man, skeptical but out of better ideas, set the basin in the corner of the workshop and returned to a different task. By the time he came back to it, perhaps an hour later, the water sat clear and still. The fine clay dust settled into a thin grey layer at the very bottom, exactly as the potter had said it would. "How did you know it would clear on its own?" "Because I've made this mistake more times than I can count," she said, smiling. "Every apprentice does at some point. You think your effort is helping. Usually, with this particular kind of trouble, your effort is the only thing in the way." Step back from the story and notice how plainly it speaks to whatever stirring is still happening in your own mind tonight. Perhaps you have been doing exactly what the young apprentice did, returning again and again to the same worry, stirring it with more thinking, more analysis, more anxious turning over, certain that one more pass at it will finally produce the clarity you are looking for. But clarity, like the water in the potter's basin, rarely arrives through more stirring. It It arrives through the simple, unglamorous act of leaving something alone long enough for its own nature to reassert itself. There is a second story worth setting beside the first. A traveler once stopped at a well in a small town to draw water after a long day on the road, only to find the well's water cloudy and unappealing, clearly disturbed by some recent use. An old woman drawing water beside him noticed his disappointment. "Wait a while," she said. "It always does this when it's been used heavily. Give it time, and it returns to itself." "How long?" "As long as it takes," she said, with no particular urgency in her voice. Wells don't keep schedules. They only know how to be still eventually, if no one keeps disturbing them. The traveler waited, and somewhat impatiently, sitting near the well while the sun lowered slowly behind the hills. He had nowhere else pressing to be, though it did not feel that way at first. And slowly, without any effort from him at all, the water did exactly what the old woman said it would. It cleared on its own time, asking nothing further of him except the simple willingness to stop checking on it every few minutes. So here is something small to carry with you tonight, soft enough not to add any new weight to a mind that has likely carried enough today already. If your thoughts feel cloudy right now, stirred up by the day's small disturbances, you do not have to clear them through more thinking. You do not have to solve your way to calm. You might simply set the basin down, the way the young apprentice did, and let it sit, undisturbed, trusting that the clarity underneath has never actually left. It is only waiting, patiently, the way it always has, for you to stop stirring long enough to let it settle back into view. There is a particular kind of seeking that exhausts people more than almost any other. The seeking that assumes whatever you are looking for must be somewhere else, somewhere further along, somewhere you have not yet arrived. We treat peace this way often, without quite noticing we are doing it, as a destination still ahead of us, reachable only after enough effort, enough searching, enough getting somewhere we currently are not. And so we keep walking, in a manner of speaking, long past the point where walking was actually required. There is an old, quiet teaching that gently undercuts this entire way of looking at things, and it says something almost embarrassingly simple, the kind of simple that can be hard to actually believe, that the path you are looking for was already underfoot the whole time, not somewhere ahead, waiting to be reached, already here, already beneath you. The very ground you have been standing on this entire time while searching for some other ground, somewhere else, that you believed would feel more like arrival. Let us explore a story about this. A traveler, weary after years of pilgrimage to distant shrines and far-off teachers, each one promising some deeper truth than the last, finally found himself, quite by accident, resting one evening at the edge of a wide valley near his own childhood home, a place he had passed through 100 times without ever once stopping to really look at it. He had not meant to come back. His journey had been pointed elsewhere, toward more famous places, more renowned teachers, but a delay on the road had left him here for the night instead, and with nothing else to do, he simply sat and watched the light change over the valley as evening settled in. An old woman tending a small fire nearby, a stranger to him, noticed him sitting so still and so quietly that she eventually asked what he was looking for, traveling alone as he clearly was. "Peace," he said. "I've been searching for years. I've visited shrines in distant mountains, sat with teachers in far-off cities, walked roads most people never bother to walk, and still, somehow, I haven't found it." The old woman looked at him for a long moment, then looked out at the same valley he had been watching. And what do you feel right now sitting here, watching this? He paused, surprised by the question, surprised even more by his own answer once he let himself actually notice it. Still, he admitted, quiet, almost at ease for the first time in longer than I can remember. Then perhaps you found what you were looking for several roads back, she said, not unkindly, and simply didn't recognize it because you assumed it would only be waiting for you somewhere further away. The traveler sat with this for a long while, watching the last light fade from the valley, and found himself returning again and again to a single uncomfortable, freeing thought, that the very stillness he had crossed countless roads searching for had perhaps been available to him at any one of those countless stopping points along the way, had he only once stopped assuming it must be somewhere else. Step back from this story and let it sit near whatever restlessness you may still be carrying tonight. Whatever sense you might have that calm is still somewhere ahead of you, still a few good decisions away, still something you have not yet earned the right to feel. Perhaps, like the traveler, you have been walking past the very ground you needed this whole time, certain it must be further along, certain that here, exactly where you currently are, could not possibly be enough. But the path under your feet right now, this bed, this breath, this particular, ordinary, unremarkable moment, may be exactly the ground the old teachings have been pointing toward all along, not a destination still ahead. Simply, quietly, here. There is a second story worth placing beside the first. A young apprentice, eager to learn from the most renowned teacher in the region, traveled a great distance to study under her, only to be assigned, for his first many months, nothing more glamorous than sweeping the courtyard each morning before sunrise. He grew frustrated, certain that the real teaching was being withheld from him, certain that somewhere beyond the sweeping, beyond the ordinary daily chores, the actual wisdom he had traveled so far for must be waiting. Finally, unable to contain his frustration any longer, he asked the teacher directly when his real instruction would begin. "It began the day you arrived," she said. "You've simply been waiting for it to look like something else. But I'm only sweeping. How can sweeping be the teaching?" "Tell me," she said, "when you sweep, where is your mind?" He admitted, somewhat sheepishly, that his mind was almost never on the sweeping itself. It was always somewhere ahead, imagining the real lessons still to come, resenting the ordinary task in front of him for not being something more important. "There it is," she said simply. "You don't need a different task to begin your training. You need to actually be present for the one already in front of you. The courtyard was never in your way. It was the entire path the whole time, waiting for you to stop looking past it. This is, in its own gentle way, exactly the same teaching the old woman offered the traveler by her fire, that we so often overlook the path because we expect it to look like something more dramatic than it does, something further away, something other than the perfectly ordinary ground we are already standing on. The sweeping was the teaching. The valley was the destination. And tonight, this very bed, this very breath, this very unremarkable, unglamorous moment of simply lying still in the dark may be doing exactly the same quiet work, whether it looks like progress to you or not. So here is something small to carry with you tonight. You do not have to travel anywhere further to find the stillness you're looking for. You do not have to wait for some better, calmer, more deserving version of tonight to arrive before you're allowed to rest. The path was always underfoot. It still is right now, holding you exactly where you already are. Let your eyes rest fully now, if they have not already, heavy and unhurried in the dark. There is no further ground to cover tonight, no next stop on some imagined road that still needs reaching. Notice the weight of the blanket, or the cool night air, or whatever small, ordinary sensation happens to be closest to you right now. That ordinary sensation is not in the way of anything. It is, in its own quiet fashion, exactly where you are meant to be. When you are ready, we will continue. There is a kind of strength that gets praised often and misunderstood almost as often. The strength of never bending, never giving way, standing perfectly rigid against whatever wind happens to blow through a life. We are taught, in countless small ways, to admire this kind of strength, the unmoving kind, the kind that looks, from a distance, like it could withstand anything. But anyone who has spent time near very old trees, the ones that have survived generation after generation of storms no younger tree could have endured, knows something quieter and stranger about how that survival actually works. The oldest trees are rarely the stiffest ones. They are, almost without exception, the ones that learned, long ago, how to bend. A tree that refuses to bend at all eventually breaks, snapped clean through by a wind it could not, finally, outstiffen. A tree that bends, on the other hand, that yields a little, sways with the gust, lets its branches give way, and then return, survives storm after storm precisely because it never tried to be unmovable in the first place. Its strength was never in its rigidity. It was in its willingness to move without losing its roots. Let us explore a story about this. In a small village at the edge of a forest, 2 trees grew side by side at the top of a hill, exposed to every storm that passed through the region. One was a tall, proud pine, admired by the villagers for how straight and unyielding it stood, year after year, never once swaying noticeably in even the strongest winds. The other was a willow, lower and less impressive to look at, its branches forever moving, forever bending, seemingly incapable of holding still even on a calm day. For many years, the villagers spoke of the pine as the stronger tree, the one that would surely outlast every storm, while they pitied the willow for its constant, restless swaying, certain it must be the weaker of the 2. Then one winter, a storm came through, unlike any the village had seen in living memory. Fierce winds bending even the sturdiest structures in the village square. In the morning, the villagers climbed the hill to check on the 2 trees. They're certain they would find the proud pine still standing and the restless willow finally torn apart. They found the opposite. The pine, which had refused to bend through years of smaller storms, had finally met a wind it could not outstiffen and lay broken and split at its base. The willow, bent nearly to the ground by the very same storm, branches scattered and tangled but roots still firmly held in the soil, had already begun, by morning, to straighten itself back upright, exactly as it always had after every storm before. An old farmer, surveying the scene, said simply to his son, who had come up the hill with him, the pine thought bending was weakness. It spent its whole life resisting what the willow learned, early on, was the only way to survive a storm at all. Step back from the story, my son, let yourself notice how directly it speaks to whatever rigidity you might be carrying tonight, whatever sense you may have that you need to hold yourself perfectly still, perfectly composed, perfectly unmoved by whatever difficulty the day brought you, in order to be considered strong. Perhaps, like the willow, you are allowed to bend. Perhaps the worry that moved through you today, the grief that still has not finished settling, the fear you have been trying so hard to hold rigidly against. Perhaps none of that needs to be met with stiffness at all. Perhaps it only needs to be met the way the willow meets a storm, bending, swaying, letting the wind move through you without needing to fight it, trusting that your roots, quietly underneath it all, are holding you exactly where you need to be held. There is a second small story worth placing beside the first. A young ree growing at the edge of a riverbank once watched a strong, sturdy oak nearby and felt embarrassed by its own thinness, its own constant trembling in even the lightest breeze, certain that the oak's solid stillness made it the better, stronger plant. One day, a violent flood came through the valley, swelling the river far beyond its banks, and the reed, terrified, bent nearly flat against the rushing water, certain it was about to be torn from the ground entirely. When the flood finally receded, the reed found itself still rooted, bent but unbroken, exactly where it had always grown. The oak, however, which had stood rigid against the full force of the flood rather than bending with it, had been uprooted entirely. It carried some distance downstream. By the very water the reed had simply allowed to move through and around it. The reed did not feel triumphant about this. It simply understood, more clearly than before, something it had perhaps always known without quite trusting, that its own thin, trembling flexibility had never been a weakness to apologize for. It had been, the entire time, exactly the kind of strength the moment actually required. So here is something small to carry with you tonight. You do not have to meet tonight's difficulty or tomorrow's with rigid stillness in order to prove your strength. You are allowed to bend. You are allowed to sway and tremble and move with whatever wind is currently passing through you, trusting that your roots, quietly beneath all of that movement, are holding firm in ways you do not have to consciously manage. The willow survives the storm the pine could not. The reed survives the flood the oak could not. And you, tonight, are allowed exactly the same permission to bend, without believing for a moment that bending means you have failed to be strong. Let your jaw loosen a little further. The small unclenching that so often goes unnoticed until you finally pay attention to it. There is nothing tonight that requires gripping, nothing that requires you to hold on tightly in order to keep it from slipping away. Notice your own breath moving in and moving out, asking nothing of you except to be allowed to continue. When you are ready, we will go a little further. There is a particular kind of tiredness that comes not from having too little, but from constantly reaching for more reassurance, more certainty, more proof that everything is going to be all right before you allow yourself to rest. We treat peace, sometimes, as something to be grasped and held onto tightly, the way you might clutch a small object in a closed fist, certain that if you loosen your grip even slightly, it will be lost to you forever. There is an old image that gently questions this instinct, and it has to do with something almost absurdly simple: an empty bowl. A full bowl, however good its contents, can only ever hold exactly what is already in it. It cannot receive anything new without first making room. An empty bowl, on the other hand, can be filled with anything at all: soup on a cold evening, rain collected from an open sky, a handful of grain given by a stranger's kindness. Its emptiness is not a lack. Its emptiness is precisely what allows it to receive. Let us explore a story about this. A wandering monk, owning nothing but the simple bowl he carried for receiving whatever food was offered to him on his travels, was once asked by a wealthy merchant why he chose to live with so little, when he could easily have settled somewhere and accumulated comfort, security, certainty about where his next meal would come from. "You carry an entire storehouse of grain," the monk said. And still, I notice, you worry about running out. Of course I worry. There is always a chance of a bad harvest. A chance the storehouse runs dry. I carry one empty bowl, the monk said, and I've never once worried about it being too full to receive what tomorrow offers. My emptiness is not a danger to me, and it is the only reason I am able to receive anything at all. The merchant did not fully accept this, certain that a full storehouse must surely be safer than an empty bowl, however philosophically appealing the monk's words sounded. But years later, after a harvest failure left his storehouse nearly bare despite all his careful planning, he found himself thinking of the wandering monk again, wondering whether his own years of gripping tightly to certainty had ever actually protected him from anything at all, or whether they had simply made the eventual emptiness, when it finally arrived uninvited, feel so much harder to bear. Step back from the story and notice what it suggests about whatever you might be gripping tonight, whatever certainty you are trying to hold on to, whatever reassurance you feel you cannot rest without first securing. Perhaps, like the monk's bowl, your own openness, your own willingness to not have every answer settled before morning is not actually a danger to you. Perhaps it is the very thing that allows rest to arrive at all. A closed fist cannot receive anything new. An open hand resting loosely at your side right now can. There is a second story worth placing beside the first. A child, given a single coin by her grandfather, clutched it so tightly in her fist for fear of losing it that by the end of the day her hand had grown sore and cramped from the effort. Her grandfather, noticing this, asked gently why she held it so fiercely. "Because if I let go, I might lose it," she said. "And if you hold it that tightly forever," he said, "you will never be able to use it for anything. A coin held in an open hand can still buy bread. A coin held in a closed fist, never opened again for fear of losing it, might as well not exist at all." She loosened her grip, slowly, and found, to her surprise, that the coin did not fall. It simply rested there, in her open palm, available to her in a way it had never quite been, while she was clenching it so tightly. So here is something small to carry with you tonight. Whatever you are gripping right now, whatever reassurance, whatever certainty, whatever small coin of control you are holding onto so tightly that your hand has grown tired from the effort, you might try, just for tonight, letting your hand rest open instead of closed. Not because letting go guarantees anything in particular, only because an open hand, like an empty bowl, there has always been the better way to receive whatever comes next. Let your hands soften now, wherever they happen to be resting, fingers loosening, palms turning gently open if that feels natural. There is nothing right now you need to hold on to so tightly. Let your breath continue at its own pace, neither rushed nor forced. When you are ready, we will go on together. There is a particular ache that comes from feeling, even briefly, as though you have to explain yourself before you're allowed back in somewhere, before you're allowed to rest, before you're allowed to be welcomed, before you're allowed simply to belong. So many of us carry some version of this without naming it directly. A quiet worry that if people really saw the messier parts of our day, our thoughts, our tangled efforts to keep everything together, they might not let us in quite so easily. And so we polish ourselves a little before we knock, even at our own door, even at the door of our own rest. There is an old image that softens this particular ache, simple enough to seem almost too plain to matter, and yet it tends to matter quite a lot. A lamp left burning in a window for someone who is coming home late. Let us explore a story about this, In a small house at the edge of a village, a mother kept a single lamp burning in the front window each night, long after the rest of the house had gone dark, for as long as her grown son lived away in a distant town and might, on any given night, find his way back unannounced. He did not visit often. Sometimes months passed, and still, every single night, without fail, she lit the same lamp and set it in the same window, regardless of whether she expected him or not. A neighbor, noticing this nightly habit, once asked her why she bothered, given how rarely he actually came. "Because the night he finally does come," she said, "I don't want him standing outside in the dark, wondering whether he's still welcome here. I don't want him needing to knock twice, or explain himself, or prove he deserves to come in after being gone so long. I want him to see the light from the road and know, before he even reaches the door, that nothing he's done or hasn't done has changed anything about whether this house is still his." The neighbor thought this seemed like a great deal of trouble for so uncertain a visit, but the mother only shrugged. "It isn't trouble," she said. "It's just a lamp. It cost me almost nothing to leave it burning, and it would cost him everything, some night when he needed it most, to find the house dark. One night, much later than expected, after a difficult stretch in the distant town that had left him exhausted and uncertain of his own welcome, the sun did finally return, walking the last stretch of road in full darkness, dreading, in some small private way, what kind of reception he might find after staying away so long. And there, exactly as it had been every single night he had been gone, the lamp was burning in the window. He did not need to knock twice. He did not need to explain a single thing before the door opened. The light had already told him everything he needed to know. Step back from the story and let it sit near whatever part of you may still believe that rest, or welcome, or peace has to be earned through some satisfactory explanation of how your day went, how well you handled things, how put together you managed to keep yourself before you were allowed to finally stop. Perhaps, like the sun walking that last dark stretch of road, you have been quietly bracing yourself to explain or apologize for something before you are let in. And perhaps, like that lamp in the window, the welcome was never actually conditional in the first place. It was burning the entire time, regardless of how the day went, waiting only for you to notice it was there. There is a second small story worth placing beside the first. Two old friends, having grown up together and grown old together, met each week at the same small table by a window, regardless of how either of their weeks had gone. One evening, one of them arrived late, visibly worn down, apologizing immediately for being poor company that night, as certain her friend deserved better than her tired, distracted presence. "I didn't invite the version of you that has a good week," her friend said simply. "I invited you. Tired is allowed at this table. It always has been." This is, in its own plain way, exactly the same teaching the lamp in the window offers. The welcome was never reserved only for your best version. It was never something you had to perform your way into. So here is something small to carry with you tonight. You do not need to arrive at your own rest having proven anything about how well today went. The lamp has been burning the whole time regardless. You are allowed in exactly as you are, tired or otherwise, tonight and every night. Let the weight of your head settle fully into the pillow beneath it now. There is no door tonight that requires knocking twice. And notice the simple, steady rhythm of your own breath, in and out, asking nothing further of you. When you are ready, we will continue a little further. There is something quietly comforting in knowing that whatever restlessness moves through you tonight has, in some form, moved through countless others before you. under this same dark sky, beneath this same patient moon. Long before you were born, and long after whatever troubles you tonight has been forgotten entirely, people have lain awake in their own version of this exact darkness, turning over their own version of these exact worries, looking for some version of the same peace you are looking for now. Let us explore one final small story about this. Two old friends, much like the ones at the window table, once sat together late into the evening, both unable to sleep, both a little embarrassed to admit it. "Do you think anyone else is awake right now, worrying about nothing in particular the way we are?" one asked. "Almost certainly," the other said. "Somewhere, under this same sky, someone else is lying awake tonight, turning over some small worry that will look entirely different by morning. We're not doing anything unusual. We're only doing what restless minds have always done, since long before either of us was born." There was something strangely soothing in this, more soothing than any solution to the worry itself could have been. Not because the worry disappeared, only because it stopped feeling quite so lonely. Once it was understood as something shared across countless nights, countless people, countless small, dark rooms not unlike their own. You are not alone tonight in whatever restlessness you carry. This has never been only your private failing. It is, in its own way, one of the oldest and most ordinary things a person can experience, shared by everyone who has ever lain in the dark, wondering whether peace might still be somewhere ahead of them, when in fact, all along, it has simply been waiting underfoot. Let your breathing settle into whatever rhythm feels natural right now, without you needing to adjust it on purpose. There is nothing lonely about this darkness. Somewhere, under this same wide sky, countless others are exactly where you are, learning exactly what you are learning. When you are ready, we will continue a little further still. During the brightest part of the day, the sky looks empty above us, a clean, simple blue, light with nothing visible in it but the sun and the occasional drifting cloud. It would be easy, looking up at noon, to believe that the stars themselves are simply gone, burned away somehow by the daylight, absent until some later, unspecified time when they might choose to return. Of course, this is not what is actually happening. The stars have not gone anywhere. They are exactly where they always are, exactly as numerous, exactly as steady, simply outshone for a while by something brighter and closer and more immediately demanding of our attention. The moment the sun finally sets and the sky darkens enough to let them through, they are revealed to have been there the entire time, patiently, without needing anyone's belief to keep existing. Let us explore a story about this. A child, frightened one evening by an afternoon thunderstorm that had darkened the sky completely and frightened away every star she thought she'd ever known, asked her father, once the storm had finally passed and night had properly fallen, whether the stars had been destroyed by the storm. "Look up," he said simply. She looked, and there they were, every one of them, exactly as bright and exactly as numerous as any other clear night. "But I couldn't see them at all during the storm," she said, confused. "I thought they were gone." "They were never gone," her father said. "You just couldn't see past the clouds for a while. That happens sometimes. It doesn't mean what you're looking for has disappeared. It only means something closer and louder is temporarily standing in front of it." The child thought about this for a long while, the way children sometimes turn an idea over slowly, without yet having the words to explain why it matters so much to them. She had been so certain, in the middle of the storm, that the stars were simply gone for good. And they had been there the entire time, patiently, waiting only for the noise and the dark clouds to finish passing through. Step back from this story and notice how directly it speaks to whatever peace might feel absent from your own life right now, on a difficult day, in a difficult stretch, during whatever storm happens to currently be passing overhead. The peace we have been speaking of tonight does not vanish simply because a busy day or a hard week or a long stretch of worry has temporarily clouded it from view. It is doing exactly what the stars do during a storm, waiting patiently, fully intact, for the clouds to finish their business and move along, as clouds always eventually do. There is a second small story worth placing beside the first. A sailor caught in heavy fog far from shore, unable to see a single star to guide his course, grew frightened that he had lost his way entirely, certain the night sky itself had abandoned him out there on the water. An older sailor beside him, having weathered far more fog than the younger man had years of experience, simply waited, calmly, doing nothing more dramatic than holding the course steady. How do you stay so calm? We can't see anything to navigate by. The stars haven't moved, the older sailor said. Only the fog is between us and them right now. Fog always lifts eventually. The stars will be exactly where they've always been, the moment it does. The fog did lift eventually, and hours later, and the stars reappeared exactly as the older sailor had promised, having been there the entire time, doing nothing more than waiting patiently for the visible world to catch back up with what had never actually changed. So here is something small to carry with you tonight. Whatever clouds, whatever fog, whatever storm has been obscuring your own sense of peace lately, the peace itself has not gone anywhere. It is doing what stars do during a storm, waiting, fully present, fully intact, for nothing more dramatic than time and patience to let it through again. Notice the quiet stillness of the room around you now, however it happens to be lit or unlit. There is nothing you need to search the sky for tonight. Whatever you're looking for has not gone anywhere. It is simply waiting, the way it always has, for the clouds of this particular day to finish passing through. When you're ready, we will continue. There is one final image worth sitting with before we begin gathering everything else together, and it may be the simplest of all. So much of what we have spoken about tonight, the lamp, the sea, the sky, the seed, the bell, the open bowl, points outward, toward images borrowed from the world around us. But there is a much closer home available to you right now, one you have never actually been without, not for a single moment of your entire life, your own body, breathing. Let us explore a story about this. A traveler far from everything familiar to him, in a town where he knew no one and understood little of the customs around him, once wrote to a friend that he had never felt so far from home in his life. He and his friend wrote back something brief, almost too simple to be useful at first glance. You're not as far from home as you think. You brought your breath with you. That has been your home since before you had any other one. The traveler did not understand this fully at first, the way it can be hard, in the middle of genuine homesickness, to be consoled by something as plain as breathing. But over the following weeks, in moments of particular loneliness, he found himself returning, almost without meaning to the simple, steady fact of his own breath, moving in and out, exactly as it always had, regardless of which town he happened to be standing in. It did not replace the home he missed, but it reminded him, again and again, that some small, steady piece of home had never actually left him, not even here, not even now. Step back from this story and notice how directly it applies to wherever you are lying right now. Whatever this particular room means to you, whatever this particular night has held so far. Your breath has been with you since before you had a name, since before you had a single memory, since before anyone ever told you who you were supposed to be. It does not require a familiar room to keep working. It does not require a good day, or a calm mind, or a settled heart, in order to keep moving in and out, quietly, faithfully, the most reliable home you have ever had. So here is something small and steady to carry with you, right to the very edge of sleep if you let it. Whatever else feels unfamiliar or unsettled tonight, your breath is exactly where it has always been, close, steady, asking nothing of you except permission to continue. You do not have to travel anywhere to find this particular home. It has been traveling with you this entire time, long before tonight, long before any of the worries currently passing through you, long before you were even given the name you now answer to. Let your hands rest now, open and unoccupied, wherever they happen to be lying. There is nothing further to reach for tonight. Notice the simple fact of being here, breathing, held by whatever is beneath you. When you are ready, we will continue just a little further. There is a kind of comfort that asks almost nothing of us, and yet we sometimes forget to let ourselves have it, certain that real comfort must be larger, more deserved, more proportionate to whatever difficulty preceded it. A warm drink held in cold hands, a blanket pulled a little higher, and a few quiet minutes with nothing required of you. These small comforts can feel, on a hard day, almost embarrassingly insufficient, as though something this small could not possibly be enough to answer something as large as the day's exhaustion. And yet, again and again, in story after story passed down through generations of people, far wiser about rest than most of us currently are, it is precisely these small, modest comforts that turn out to be enough, not because they erase the difficulty, only because they remind the tired body that it is allowed, even now, even after a hard day, to receive something gentle. Let us explore a story about this. A weary traveler arriving late at a small house after an exhausting journey through cold weather. He expected little from the modest household that took him in for the night. Perhaps a place by the fire, perhaps a simple meal, nothing more. The old woman who lived there set a cup of tea in his cold hands almost the moment he arrived, before any conversation, before any explanation of who he was or where he had come from. "You don't even know my name yet," he said, half laughing, wrapping his hands gratefully around the warm cup. "Your hands are cold," she said simply. "That's all I needed to know for now. The rest can wait until you've warmed up a little." He sat by her fire for a long while that evening, saying very little, simply holding the warm cup and feeling slowly some of the day's exhaustion loosen its grip on him. It was not a large gesture. It was not even, by most measures, a particularly remarkable one. And yet it was, that night, exactly enough. Step back from this story and let it sit beside whatever exhaustion you might be carrying right now, whatever sense you may have that nothing small could possibly be sufficient to answer how tired you actually are. Perhaps it does not need to be large. Perhaps, like the old woman's tea, the comfort available to you tonight, the simple warmth of your own blanket, the simple stillness of this room, the simple act of lying still and letting your breath continue, does not need to match the size of the day in order to be enough. Small comfort, received fully, has always been allowed to be enough. There is a second small story worth setting beside the first. A child, upset after a difficult day at school, was given nothing more elaborate by her father than a few quiet minutes sitting together on the back step and watching the evening settle in, neither of them saying very much. Later, grown, she would not remember the specific difficulty of that particular school day at all. She would remember, instead, the quiet back step and the simple, undemanding comfort of having been sat with, without needing the day's trouble to be solved first. This is, in its own way, the same gentle permission the old woman's tea offered the traveller. That comfort does not need to solve anything in order to help. It only needs to be received, simply. The way warmth is received by cold hands, without requiring the difficulty itself to disappear first. So here is something small to carry with you tonight. You do not need a large solution to a large day. You are allowed the small comfort of this exact moment, this blanket, this breath, this stillness, without first requiring it to fix everything that felt difficult earlier. Small comfort, fully received, has always, quietly, been enough. Notice the particular warmth or coolness of the air against your skin right now, neither needing adjustment nor explanation. There is nothing large required of you in this moment. Let this small, ordinary comfort be enough, exactly as it is. When you are ready, we will continue a little further. There is something the body remembers that the mind, on a restless night, sometimes forgets entirely. The simple, well-worn path back to rest. You may feel tonight as though you have lost your way to sleep, as though the road there has gone unfamiliar, overgrown, harder to find than it used to be. And yet your body has walked this particular path more times than you could ever count, every single night of your life, long before you ever needed to think about how it worked. Let us explore a story about this. A shepherd, returning home each evening along the same worn path through long grass at the edge of his family's land, was once asked by a visitor how he managed to find his way home so easily in near total darkness, with no lantern and no clear markers visible along the route. "I don't find it," he said. "My feet already know it. I stopped needing to think about it years ago." "But what if you got distracted, thinking about something else entirely?" "Then my feet would still bring me home," he said, smiling. "That's the whole point of a worn path. It doesn't need your full attention to work. It only needs you to keep walking, and trust that the ground beneath you already knows where it's leading." The visitor found this hard to believe, certain that surely some conscious effort was required to find one's way home in the dark. But walking with the shepherd that same evening, distracted by conversation, paying no particular attention to the route at all, he found himself, without quite noticing the transition, standing at the shepherd's own door, having arrived exactly where he was meant to, without ever consciously steering himself there. Step back from this story and consider your own well-worn path home tonight, the path your own body has walked every single night of your life, long before tonight, long before any of the particular worries currently keeping your mind occupied. You do not have to consciously steer yourself towards sleep. You do not have to think your way carefully down the right road. Your body already knows this path better than your mind does. It has walked it more times than either of you could count. You are allowed tonight to simply keep walking, however distracted your thoughts happen to be, and trust the ground beneath you to lead you home the way it always has. Let the back of your head settle fully into the pillow now, the way it has every night before this one, without needing your conscious help to remember how. There is a path home tonight that your body already knows by heart. You do not have to find it. You only have to keep walking gently, however distracted your thoughts happen to be. When you are ready, we will continue. There is a particular harshness many of us turn on ourselves at night, cataloguing every small flaw, every unfinished task, every way we fell short of who we meant to be that day, as though any of this disqualified us from rest, from peace, from simply being considered whole. We treat ourselves, in these moments, the way an overly anxious gardener might treat a garden full of small weeds, convinced that the presence of any imperfection at all means the entire garden has failed. Let us explore a story about this. An old gardener, known throughout her village for the beauty of her flowers, was once visited by a younger gardener anxious about the weeds scattered through her own much smaller plot. "I'll never have a garden as lovely as yours," the younger woman said. "Not while these weeds keep coming back no matter how often I pull them." The old gardener walked with her to look at the plot in question, examining it carefully. "You have weeds," she agreed. "So do I. Every garden does. The difference isn't whether weeds appear. The difference is whether you decide the weeds mean the garden has failed, or whether you simply keep tending to it anyway, weeds and all. But your garden looks so much more finished than mine." "It isn't finished," the old woman laughed. "It never will be. I pulled 3 weeds myself just this morning. A garden was never meant to be a finished thing. It's a living thing, which means it will always have a few weeds in it, right alongside the flowers. That's not failure. That's simply what a garden, any garden, actually looks like up close. Step back from this story and let it sit beside whatever harsh self-judgment you may be carrying tonight about today's particular weeds. The conversation you wish had gone differently, and the task left unfinished, the moment you were less patient than you wanted to be. None of this disqualifies you from rest. None of this means the whole garden has failed. A garden with weeds in it is still fully and completely a garden. And you, weeds and all, are still fully and completely allowed to rest tonight, exactly as you are. There is a second small story worth placing beside the first. A young apprentice, embarrassed by the small imperfections still visible in a bowl he had spent weeks shaping, brought it reluctantly to his teacher, certain it would be rejected for its flaws. The old potter turned it over slowly in her hands, studying the slightly uneven rim, the faint thumbprint still visible near its base. "This is good work," she said, "but look at the rim. It's not even, and you can see where my thumb pressed too hard. Right here." "I see exactly where you were," she said, tracing the small thumbprint gently with her own finger. "That's not a flaw. That's evidence that a person made this with their own hands, doing their best with what they knew at the time. A perfectly even bowl with no trace of anyone in it would be far less interesting to me than this one." He kept that particular bowl for the rest of his life, imperfections and all, valuing it more, in the end, than several more technically flawless pieces he made in later years. So here is something small to carry with you tonight. Whatever imperfect, weed-filled, thumbprint-marked version of today you are bringing into this rest, you're allowed to bring it exactly as it is. You do not have to arrive at sleep having pulled every weed, smoothed every uneven rim, have fixed every small flaw from the day before you are considered worthy of rest. The garden, weeds and all, is still a garden. The bowl, thumbprint and all, is still good work. And you, exactly as you are tonight, are still, fully and completely, allowed to rest. We have walked through a great many small images tonight, lamps and rivers, bells and seeds, an open bowl, a worn path through long grass. And it would be easy to wonder, at this point, how any of it actually fits together, or whether it needs to fit together at all. So let us close this part of our time together with one final small story, simpler than the rest, about an entirely ordinary person on an entirely ordinary evening who managed, without ever realizing it, to live out almost everything we have spoken of tonight. She was tired, not dramatically tired, not tired in any way that would make for an interesting story if you were watching from the outside. Just the ordinary, accumulated tiredness of an ordinary day, the kind most of us carry home with us more nights than not. She let herself into a quiet house, the kind of quiet that comes specifically from being alone after a long day around other people. And the first thing she did, almost without thinking about it, was light a small lamp near the window, the way she did most evenings, more out of habit than any particular purpose. She did not know, lighting that lamp, that she was doing something people have done for as long as there have been wicks and flames and dark rooms to hold them. Passing a small, old warmth along to a new resting place for the night, the same warmth that has been handed down, lamp to lamp, far longer than anyone has bothered to count. She only knew the room felt less empty with the light on. That was enough reason for her. She put the kettle on next, the way she did most nights, and while it warmed, she sat for a moment at the table, simply being still, and noticed, the way you notice these things on a tired evening, a small worry beginning to surface, something about tomorrow, something unfinished, the particular flavor of evening dread that arrives uninvited the moment the house finally goes quiet. She did not fight it. She did not have the energy left to fight it, if she is honest. And so, without quite deciding to, she simply let it sit there with her for a while, the way you'd let a tired guest take a chair by the fire without needing to entertain them. The worry did not need solving right then, and it only might needed somewhere to sit until it grew tired enough to quiet down on its own, the way most worries eventually do, given enough patience and no further fuel. The kettle, when it finally whistled, startled her slightly, then settled quickly into the kind of quiet that follows any loud sound, left alone long enough to fade, the way a struck bell eventually returns to silence without anyone needing to press a hand against it to hurry the process along. She poured the tea and held the warm cup in both hands for a long moment before drinking any of it, feeling the simple, modest comfort of something warm against cold fingers. Not particularly large as comforts go, but entirely enough for that particular moment. Through the window, while she sat with her tea, she noticed the sky had clouded over, the way it sometimes does in the evening, hiding whatever stars might otherwise have been visible. She did not worry that the stars were gone. She had seen enough clear nights to know they were still there, exactly where they always were, simply waiting behind cloud cover that would, eventually, the way cloud cover always does, move along. She glanced too at the small patch of garden visible from her kitchen window, slightly overgrown, a few stray weeds she had meant to pull weeks ago and somehow never gotten around to. She felt, for just a moment, the old familiar pull of guilt about it, and then, just as quickly, let it go. It was still a garden. The weeds did not undo that. It could wait until tomorrow, or the day after, or whenever she next had the energy for it, and none of that waiting made the garden, or her, any less whole in the meantime. When she finally rose to go to bed, she walked the same short hallway she walked every night, barely glancing at it, her feet already knowing every step of the route without needing her full attention to guide them. She did not think, consciously, about home, or about belonging, or about whether she deserved this particular bed after this particular day. She simply walked the familiar path, the way she always had, and let it lead her exactly where it always led her. Lying down, she noticed her own breath, the same breath that had been with her through every version of every day she had ever lived, asking nothing more of her now than it ever had, simply permission to continue. She did not solve the day's small worry before falling asleep. She did not finish the garden, or answer every uncertain question still circling faintly in the back of her mind. She simply let herself rest, exactly as she was, weeds and unfinished tasks and small worries and all, trusting, without needing to put it into precise words, that none of it disqualified her from this particular, ordinary, entirely sufficient rest. This is when you step all the way back from it, almost the entire teaching we have been circling tonight, gathered quietly into one unremarkable evening. The lamp she lit without thinking about where the flame originally came from. The worry she welcomed instead of fighting. The kettle's noise that settled into silence on its own, without her help. The small, modest comfort of warmth in cold hands. The stars she trusted were still there behind the clouds. The gardens she allowed to remain imperfect for one more night. The familiar path her own feet knew by heart, leading her home without requiring her full attention. The breath that had been quietly, faithfully present through every day of her life, asking only to be allowed to continue. She did nothing extraordinary that evening. That is precisely the point. She did not need to. The peace she eventually settled into was not something she built, brick by effortful brick, through some elaborate practice or hard-won technique. It was something she simply stopped getting in the way of. For one ordinary evening, the same way the sky stops nothing, and yet hosts every passing storm. The same way a river arrives at the sea, not through struggle, but through nothing more complicated than continuing to flow. You are, in all likelihood, far closer to her than you might currently believe. You do not need a single new skill to find the rest you are reaching for tonight. You do not need to have understood every image we have offered, or remembered every small story, or done anything at all with what you have heard. The peace this entire night has been pointing toward was never something we were trying to give you from outside, the way you might hand someone a gift they did not previously have. It was something we were only trying to help you notice, gently, the way you might help a friend notice a window they had simply forgotten was already open. You already have everything you need for tonight. You have had it the entire time. Let your whole body soften now, a little more than it was even a few minutes ago. There is nothing left to gather up tonight. Everything that needed naming has been named gently, and the rest can simply rest alongside you, unfinished and unsolved, exactly as it is. When you are ready, we will move toward our final stretch together. There is a particular fear that arrives sometimes, right at the edge of sleep, about everything that might go untended while you are no longer awake to manage it. The small worries you are holding together through sheer wakeful effort. The sense that if you stop watching everything for even a few hours, something important might slip. It can feel, on certain nights, as though staying alert a little longer is the only thing keeping everything from quietly falling apart. There is an old, plain image that gently questions this particular fear. A hearth fire, banked carefully for the night. Let us explore a story about this, and in a house at the edge of a cold valley, where keeping a fire through the night mattered a great deal more than it does in most places now. An old woman taught her granddaughter each evening how to bank the coals properly before bed, covering them just enough, arranging them just so the fire would not blaze through the night, but also would not go out entirely, simply holding steady embers until morning, ready to be coaxed back to full flame with very little effort. The first few nights, the granddaughter woke repeatedly, anxious, certain the fire must have gone out without her there to watch it, certain something so important could not possibly survive untended through so many dark hours. "Go and look in the morning," her grandmother told her gently after the third such restless night. "Trust the banking. You did the work already before bed. The fire doesn't need you awake all night to keep doing its job. It only needed you to set it up properly once, and then to trust it." The granddaughter reluctantly stopped checking, and in the morning, exactly as her grandmother had promised, she found the embers still glowing quietly beneath their covering of ash, ready, with only a little encouragement, to become a full fire again. Nothing had been lost in the hours she had not been watching. The fire had simply continued doing, quietly, in the dark, exactly what banked fires have always done. Step back from this story and let it sit beside whatever you might be afraid to stop watching tonight, whatever small worry insists it needs your continued wakeful attention in order to survive until morning. Perhaps, like the banked fire, or the things you are worried about have already been set up as well as they currently can be. Perhaps they do not need you awake all night, standing guard over them in order to still be there, intact. When morning comes, you did what you could today. The embers are banked. You are allowed now to trust the covering of ash and let the fire continue its quiet work without your supervision. There is a second small story worth setting beside the first. A father, anxious about leaving his young son with a trusted neighbor for a single overnight trip, found himself unable to stop worrying the entire time he was away, certain something would go wrong the moment he was no longer there to watch over things directly. When he returned, he found his son perfectly content, the neighbor entirely capable, nothing at all amiss in his absence. "Oh, you worried the whole time, didn't you?" the neighbor said, smiling, recognizing the particular exhaustion on his face. "I couldn't help it. I felt like I had to stay alert, even from a distance, just in case." "Some things hold together fine without your constant watching," she said. "That's not a failure on your part. It's just how trust eventually has to work, sooner or later, with almost everything you care about. So here is something small to carry with you tonight. Whatever you're tempted to keep watching, keep managing, keep holding together through sheer wakeful effort, you might consider, just for tonight, that it has already been banked as well as it can be for now. You're allowed to stop standing guard. The embers will still be there in the morning, quietly glowing, exactly as they were left. There is a final small image worth offering before we begin to close, gentler than almost any other tonight, about why none of this, none of the rest we have spoken of, none of the piece we have circled around from so many angles, was ever meant to be carried alone. Let us explore one last small story. Two hands belonging to the same person were once imagined by an old teacher as washing each other clean after a long day of work in the fields. Neither hand could wash itself fully on its own. Each one needed the other, taking turns, giving what it could, receiving what it needed, until both were clean. Neither hand felt foolish for needing the other's help. It had simply always worked that way and always would. We are taught, so often, to manage everything privately, to handle our own rest, our own worry, our own healing, entirely on our own, as though needing anyone else's help with any of it was some kind of quiet failure. But almost nothing that matters including the very peace we have spent this whole night circling, was ever meant to be carried entirely alone. You're allowed to lean on someone tomorrow, if leaning is what tonight's tiredness eventually asks of you. You're allowed to need the people in your life the way one tired hand needs the other. This has never been a flaw in you. It has only ever been how the whole arrangement was designed to work from the very beginning. Let your breath slow a little further now, in whatever way feels natural, without forcing it to move any faster towards sleep than it wants to. There is nothing left to carry alone tonight. Whatever weight you have been holding, you're allowed to set down, at least for these last few minutes, and trust that it will still be there, manageable, in the morning. When you're ready, we will begin to close. Let us return, for just a moment, to where we began this evening, to that quiet, half-remembered moment just after birth, before any name had yet been given. It is worth sitting with this one final time, because it says something simple and easy to forget about the order in which things actually happened in your own life, long before you can remember any of it. You knew how to rest before you knew your own name. You knew how to breathe before anyone had taught you a single word. You were held, fed, kept warm, allowed simply to exist, long before anyone asked you to become anything in particular, long before any achievement, any explanation, any proof of worth was ever required of you, as the peace came first. Everything else, the name, the expectations, the long list of things you eventually learned to worry about, came considerably later, added on top of something that had already, quietly, always been whole. Let us explore one small final story about this. A mother, watching her newborn sleep peacefully in her arms only hours after birth, marveled at how easily the small body had simply settled into rest, with no instruction, no practice, no understanding yet of anything at all. An older relative beside her, having raised several children of her own, smiled at the marveling. She already knows how to do this, the older woman said. Better than any of us, probably. We're the ones who eventually forget. Forget what? How simple it actually is, when we spend years afterward relearning what she already knows perfectly well right now, lying there. Rest doesn't have to be taught. It only has to be allowed. Somewhere along the way, most of us pick up all sorts of complicated ideas about needing to earn it, or deserve it, or work hard enough to be allowed to have it. She hasn't learned any of that yet. She's just resting, the way she always knew how to. The mother looked down again at her sleeping child, and felt for a moment something settle in her own chest as well. Not a new understanding, exactly. More like an old one, briefly remembered. You were exactly like that once, before any of the complicated ideas arrived, before anyone taught you that rest had to be earned, that peace had to be built from nothing through effort, that you had to prove yourself worthy of the very stillness you are reaching for right now. You already knew once, long before you can remember it, how simple this actually was. And in some quiet way, underneath everything you have since picked up, you may still know it now. Before we let everything settle fully into rest, there is one more small thing worth turning over gently in the mind. The way you might turn a smooth stone over in your palm once more, before setting it down for the night. It has to do with how easily we forget that some of what we do in a day is never meant to be finished by us at all, and how much quieter life becomes once that particular kind of forgetting is allowed to happen. So much of what fills your hours and your worry comes from a quiet assumption that everything you start, like you're also responsible for completing and seeing succeed and watching bear fruit, ideally before you can rest easy about it. But so much of what truly matters was never built that way. A great deal of what holds your life together right now, the ground you walk on, the comforts you barely notice anymore, was begun by people who never lived to see it finished and will be carried forward after you, by people you will never meet and never need to. Let us explore a story about this. In a certain valley, there lived an old orchard keeper who had spent the better part of her life planting trees. One particular morning, a young apprentice, newly arrived to learn the work, watched her dig a hole, settle a small sapling into it, and pack the earth gently around its thin trunk with the flat of her hand. "How long before this one bears fruit?" the apprentice asked. "Longer than I have left," the old woman said, without any sadness in her voice, the way someone might mention the weather. 20 years perhaps, maybe longer, depending on the season and the soil." The apprentice frowned, confused. "Then why plant it? You'll never taste a single fruit from this tree." The old woman sat back on her heels and looked at the small sapling for a long moment, as though considering the apprentice's question seriously, which he was. "Someone planted the orchard I ate from as a child," she said finally. "I never knew their name. I never thanked them, because by the time I was old enough to think of thanking anyone, they were already long gone. It never once occurred to me, eating that fruit as a girl, that someone had done this work without me. And that is exactly how it should be. The tree doesn't need me to see it grow. It only needs me to plant it well, and then let it go on growing in its own time, long after my part in the matter is finished." Doesn't that feel unfinished, though? Doing all this work and never seeing how it turns out. "It would, if I thought the work was mine to finish," the old woman said. "But it never was. My part was only ever the planting. The growing belongs to the tree, and the seasons, and the rain, and whoever happens to be standing nearby in 20 years to pick the fruit. I did my part already, the moment the roots touch soil. Everything after this is simply the world continuing to do what it was always going to do, with or without my permission, with or without my watching." She patted the earth once more, stood, brushed the soil from her knees, and moved on to the next hole, already half dug a little further down the row, as though the conversation and the tree were both already settled matters, requiring nothing further from her that day. There is a certain kind of peace available to you the moment you allow yourself to believe what the old orchard keeper believed so easily, that your part in something can be entirely finished long before its outcome is visible, and that this is not a failure of completion, but simply how completion has always worked for the things that matter most. You planted what you planted today, in whatever small way you tended to your work, your family, your own healing, your own slow becoming. Whatever grows from that, however long it takes, however it eventually turns out. And this is no longer something you need to supervise tonight in order for your planting to have counted. It already counted the moment you did it. Let us explore one more small story about this from a slightly different angle. A stonemason, building a low wall along a country road, was asked by a passing traveller why he bothered to set each stone so carefully, fitting each one to the one beside it with such patient attention, when the wall would likely outlast him by centuries, and he would never know who walked past it, or whether they even noticed the careful fitting at all. "I won't know," the stonemason agreed. "I'll never meet the person whose hand rests on this wall 100 years from now, tired from a long walk, glad simply to have something solid to lean against for a moment. I'll never know if they think about the stones at all, or simply lean there without a second thought, the way you might lean against any wall without wondering who built it. Then why care so much about how it's fitted? Because the wall doesn't know. I won't be there to see it used, the stonemason said simply. It only knows whether it was built well or built carelessly. I'm not building this for my own satisfaction at watching people use it. I'm building it because building it well is simply the work in front of me right now. And the work in front of me right now is enough of a reason on its own. You may be carrying right now, somewhere in the quieter part of your mind, a worry about something you have started but cannot yet see the ending of. A kindness extended to someone whose response you do not know. An effort made towards something whose outcome remains unclear. At a hope planted in soil whose harvest you may never personally witness. Carry this with you tonight, gently, the way you might carry the old orchard keeper's small certainty in your pocket. Your part was the planting. The growing belongs to time and to the world, and to whatever quiet forces carry a good effort forward long after your hands have let go of it. You're allowed to rest now fully, without waiting to see how it all turns out. Let yourself notice for just a moment the simple weight of your own eyelids, however heavy or light they happen to feel right now. Notice that you are not holding them closed through any particular effort. They are simply resting there, the way the stonemason's stones rest against one another, each one settled into exactly the place it needed to be, asking nothing further of the stones around it. And let your eyelids stay exactly that heavy, exactly that settled, for as long as they want to. There is one further small matter worth turning over before sleep, something gentler still, closer to the heart than the last, having to do with how easily we forgive others and how rarely, by comparison, we extend that same forgiveness toward ourselves. You have likely noticed, at some point in your life, how naturally kindness seems to arrive when it is meant for someone else. A friend stumbles, says the wrong thing, fails at something they were trying hard to get right, and you find the gentle words almost without searching for them. That's all right. You were doing your best. Anyone might have made that mistake. The kindness comes easily, almost automatically, and the way water finds the low places in the ground without needing to be shown the way. And yet, when the very same stumble happens to you, the very same softness so rarely seems to arrive on its own. Something else arrives instead, something sharper, something far less patient. Let us explore a story about this. In a small village, there lived a healer known for the particular gentleness of her care. Travelers who arrived exhausted, having walked further than their bodies could comfortably manage, were given a warm place by her fire, a simple meal, and as long as they needed to rest before continuing on. She never asked why they had pushed themselves so far, never suggested they should have planned better, never hurried their recovery along. She simply tended to them, patiently, for as long as tending was needed. One evening, Yashan, a young woman who'd been helping the healer for several months, noticed something curious. The healer, after a long day spent caring for others, sat alone by the dying fire, looking exhausted in a way she never allowed her patients to look, and yet offered herself none of the same gentleness she so freely gave away all day. You'd never let one of your patients sit like this, worn through and uncared for, the young woman said. You'd have them resting by now, fed, warmed, told that it's all right to be tired. Why don't you tell yourself the same thing? The healer looked up, surprised, as though the thought had genuinely never occurred to her in quite that shape before. I suppose, she said slowly, I never thought of myself as someone who needed tending the same way they do. Don't you get just as tired? I do. Don't you make just as many mistakes, miss just as many things? need just as much rest as anyone who walks through that door. The healer was quiet for a long moment, watching the fire settle into its last low embers. "I think," she said finally, "I forgot somewhere along the way that the kindness I give so easily to strangers was always meant to include myself as well. I simply never extended the invitation." From that evening on, the village noticed very little difference in how the healer cared for others. But those closest to her noticed she had begun, in small ways, to also rest when she was tired, to forgive herself when she made a mistake, to speak to herself in the quiet hours, with something closer to the gentleness she had always offered so freely to everyone else. You are allowed tonight to extend that same invitation to yourself, the one the healer had somehow forgotten to send. Whatever you got wrong today, whatever you wish you had said differently or done more carefully, whatever quiet failure you have been carrying without naming it directly, you are permitted to offer yourself the very same words you would offer a tired friend in exactly your position. You were doing your best. Anyone might have struggled with that. It's all right now. Rest. Carry this with you, not as something to remember tomorrow, but simply as a permission already quietly granted. The same softness you give so easily to others has always been available to you as well. You only ever needed to extend the invitation to yourself. And notice, for a slow moment, the particular stillness of the room around you right now, however dark or dim or faintly lit it happens to be. Notice that the stillness is not something you are creating through effort. It is simply already there. The way the healer's gentleness was always already there, waiting only to be turned, finally, in your own direction. There is one last small thing worth setting down gently before we finish. Something to do with all the questions that remain unanswered tonight. The ones you may have carried to bed with you without quite meaning to. The loose threads of the day that never got tied off. The decisions not yet made, the conversations not yet finished. The small uncertainties that like to wait until the lights go out before making themselves known. It can feel in the dark, as though sleep is only allowed once every open question has been closed, as though the mind needs to hand in a finished piece of work before it is permitted to rest. But this has never actually been true, however convincing it can feel at 11 at night. Rest has never once required your full understanding of tomorrow before it was willing to arrive. Let us explore a story about this. There was once a lighthouse keeper who lived alone on a small rocky point, tending a single steady light that turned slowly through the night, out toward the dark water. He never saw the ships his light was guiding. He never knew their names, their cargo, where they had come from or where they were bound, whether the captains were anxious or calm, whether the crossing that night was easy or difficult. He simply turned the light and trimmed the wick and kept the glass clean and went to sleep each night without ever once learning how any particular ship's journey had actually gone. A young relative, staying with him one summer, found this strange. "Doesn't it bother you," she asked, "not knowing if the ships make it safely? You do all this work and never find out how the story ends." "I used to think it should bother me," the old keeper admitted. "When I was younger, I'd lie awake some nights, wondering about a ship I'd seen pass earlier, worrying whether it had made it through the rocks further down the coast, whether the light had been bright enough, whether I'd done my part well enough. It took me a long while to understand that none of that worrying ever once changed how the light worked or how the ships fared. The light does its job whether I'm anxious about it or sleeping peacefully through the night. My worrying was never actually part of the lighthouse's work at all. It was just something extra I added on top, out of habit. thinking it made me more responsible somehow. So you just let it go. Every night, not knowing. Every night, he said. I turn the light, I make sure it's burning well, and then I let the rest of it be exactly what it's always been. Out of my hands. The not knowing doesn't go away. I simply stop treating the not knowing as a problem that needed solving before I was allowed to sleep. The young woman thought about this for a long while, watching the beam sweep slowly across the dark water below them, illuminating nothing in particular, simply turning, simply doing what it had always done, night after night, regardless of who was watching or worrying about it. You may be holding, tonight, a question or two of your own that has no answer yet, a small uncertainty about tomorrow, or next week, or something further off still, that you cannot resolve simply by staying awake and turning it over one more time. Carry this with you gently. Your part, like the lighthouse keepers, was only ever to do the steady work in front of you, as well as you reasonably could. Whatever happens next, whatever the unanswered question eventually resolves into, is not something that needs deciding tonight, in this particular bed, at this particular hour. The light keeps turning whether you watch it or not. Let it turn without you for a while. You're allowed to close your eyes on an unfinished sentence and trust that the rest of it will still be there, awaiting patiently whenever you are ready to pick it back up. Let yourself notice the soft, unremarkable sound of your own breath moving through the quiet room. Whatever else might be sounding faintly around you, distant or close, familiar or unfamiliar. None of it requires your attention. None of it requires solving. It is simply the sound of a night continuing on, the way nights have always continued on, with or without anyone awake to keep watch over them. If you notice, looking back over the last few small stories we shared, that they all seem to circle the same quiet point from slightly different directions, that is not by accident. The orchard keeper who planted without needing to see the harvest, the healer who finally learned to offer herself the same gentleness she gave so freely to others, and the lighthouse keeper who turned his light without ever learning how any particular ship's crossing went, each of them, in their own way, had simply stopped insisting that an outcome be visible or a kindness be earned, or a question be answered, before they were allowed to rest easy with what they had already done. None of them stopped caring. They simply stopped attaching their peace to something outside their own hands. You have done a great deal today that you may not have given yourself credit for, things whose outcomes you cannot yet see and may never fully know, kindnesses you may have already forgotten extending, small, steady efforts whose harvest belongs to some later season you are not required to wait awake for. You do not need the full story tonight. You only needed to do your part, the way the orchard keeper did hers, the way the stonemason did his one stone, one root, one turn of the light at a time. The rest of it, whatever it eventually becomes, was never yours to finish lying here, awake, waiting for proof. It is allowed to keep growing quietly in the dark, the way most things that matter actually grow, unseen, unsupervised, entirely trustworthy without your supervision. We have walked a long way together tonight, through villages that never existed on any map, past lamps and rivers and old monastery bells, alongside gardeners and weavers and tired travelers who were never quite real, and yet, in some way, felt entirely familiar. You do not need to remember any of it, not the lamplighter, not the willow bending in the storm, not the woman with her tea, not the old gardener with her weeds. None of it needs to be carried forward as something to recall later, recited or proven useful in the morning. It has already done whatever quiet work it was going to do, simply by passing through you tonight, the way water passes through soil and leaves something behind even after it has moved on, even after you could no longer point to exactly where it went. You do not have to hold on to the lamp past flame to flame. You do not have to hold on to the river finding its way home to the sea, or the sky staying calm beneath every passing storm, or the seed doing its quiet work in the dark soil, unseen, unsupervised, exactly on its own schedule. Let all of it go now, the way you would let go of a hand you have been holding for a long walk, gently, without any need to apologize for finally releasing your grip. The walk is done for tonight. The hand can rest now too. There is nothing left to figure out before you are allowed to sleep. There is nothing left to solve, nothing left to plan, nothing left to rehearse for tomorrow. Whatever tomorrow turns out to need from you, it will still be there waiting in the morning, patient, unhurried, exactly as it would have been, whether you spent tonight worrying about it or not. You are permitted fully to set it down now. Not because it doesn't matter, only because it does not need you. Not this particular minute, not while your body is this tired and this close to finally letting go. Let your breathing slow further still, however it wants to, in its own unhurried time. There is no rush in this. There has never been any rush in this. The body knows how to do this part on its own. It has always known, since long before tonight, and since long before any of the stories we told you, since long before you were given a single word to describe any of it. Let your shoulders sink a little deeper into whatever is holding them. Let your hands stay open, unclenched, asking nothing further of the night. Let your jaw soften, the small release that so often arrives last of all, right at the very edge of sleep. You do not have to remember the bell that quieted itself, the silence that was always underneath the ringing, waiting patiently for the ringing to finish its course. You do not have to remember the guest welcomed in from the cold, given a seat by the fire, allowed to sit there until it grew tired enough to settle on its own. You do not have to remember the muddy water clearing in its own time, the path that was underfoot the entire journey, at the willow bending instead of breaking, the open hand instead of the closed fist. All of it has already settled into you somewhere, quietly, the way things do when they are simply allowed to pass through without being grasped at too tightly. You do not need to check that it landed correctly. You do not need to verify that any of it worked. Let it go. Let it rest the way you are about to rest. Somewhere outside this room, whatever room you happen to be in, the same old sky is doing what it has always done, holding its quiet shape underneath whatever weather happens to be passing through it tonight, in your particular corner of the world. Somewhere, behind whatever clouds may currently be covering them, the same stars are waiting, patiently, the way they always wait, for nothing more dramatic than time to let them through again. None of this requires your attention right now. None of this requires you to stay awake checking on it. It will all still be exactly where it has always been, regardless of whether you are watching it or not. The same way it was there long before you arrived to watch it for the first time. And the same way it will remain long after you have stopped watching for the night. There is nowhere you need to be right now, except exactly here. There is nothing you need to become tonight, except exactly what you already quietly are. Tired, breathing, held enough. You were enough before any of tonight's stories were told. You were enough before you had a name to answer to, before anyone taught you to measure your worth against your accomplishments, before the whole complicated business of proving yourself ever began. That was always added on top of something that did not need adding to in the first place. Underneath all of it, The original peace is still there, the same peace that was with you before you were born, the same peace that has never actually left, no matter how many storms have passed through the sky above it, no matter how many small fires have flared and settled throughout the whole long course of your life so far. You do not have to reach for that peace right now. You do not have to work your way toward it, or earn your way into it, or prove that you deserve it before it is allowed to hold you. It has been holding you the entire time, the way a path holds a traveler's feet, without requiring conscious thought, the way a riverbed holds a river without asking anything of the water at all. Let it hold you now too, and let your body sink further into the bed beneath you, heavier now, looser now, closer to sleep than it was even a few minutes ago. Notice one last time the simple fact of your own breath, not managing it, not adjusting it, simply noticing it, the way you might notice an old friend who has been quietly in the room the entire evening without needing to announce themselves. It moves in, it moves out. It has done this every single moment of your entire life, without exception, without fail, without ever once asking your permission first. It does not need your permission now either. Let it continue exactly as it wants to. Slower now, softer now. However it wants to move you toward the sleep that is already, even now, beginning to arrive. There is nothing more to teach tonight. There is nothing more to learn, nothing more to understand, and nothing more to carry forward into tomorrow, except whatever rest you allow yourself right now, in this exact moment, in this exact body, in this exact quiet room. Whatever the day asked of you, it is finished asking for now. Whatever tomorrow will ask of you, it has not yet begun to ask. You are, for these last few minutes before sleep finally takes you, entirely free. Free of the day behind you, free of the day ahead of you, free simply to rest the way you were always able to rest, long before anyone taught you it might be complicated. Let your eyes rest fully closed now, if they are not closed already. Let your whole body settle, fully, into whatever is holding it. Let the room around you fade a little further, the edges softening, the way edges always soften right before sleep finally arrives. You do not have to do anything else tonight. You do not have to think anything else, solve anything else, remember anything else. You only have to let yourself be exactly as tired, exactly as held, exactly as at peace as you already, quietly, are. Wherever you are lying right now, whatever shape your body has settled into, however the blankets happen to be arranged around you, let all of it be exactly as it is, without adjusting, without improving, without one more small shift to find something better than what you already have. What you already have is enough for sleep to arrive. It has always been enough, every single night of your life, however the bed was made or unmade, however the room was arranged, however the day before it had gone. Sleep has never once required perfect conditions. It has only ever required permission, and you are giving yourself that permission now, fully, without reservation. The same permission the seed was given in its dark soil, the same permission the river was given on its long way to the sea, the same permission you yourself were given, quietly, long before you had a name to receive it under. Let the last of today's thoughts pass by now, without your needing to follow them anywhere, the way clouds pass over a sky that was never actually troubled by their presence in the first place, only temporarily covered, never once changed underneath. Whatever they were about, work or worry or some small unfinished thing, they can keep moving on their own, the way clouds always have, without your escort, without your supervision, without one more minute of your tired attention. You're allowed to simply watch them go, or not even watch, as simply let them go, the way you let go of nearly everything else tonight, gently, without ceremony, without needing to mark the moment in any particular way. Feel how close you already are to the sleep that has been waiting for you this whole time, patient, the way the stars are patient behind the clouds, the way the path is patient underfoot, the way the peace beneath everything has been patient with you across this entire long day and every day that came before it. It is still here. It was always still here. There is nothing left to do now except let it finish the work. It already started the moment you closed your eyes. Sleep well. You were at peace before any of this began, and that same peace, unhurried and unchanged, is still right here with you now, holding you gently the rest of the way home.